they are trying to take a course of actions that will degrade the Syrian military to an extent that it won't pose any threat for many years to come.
The Israeli military has said its forces are operating beyond a demilitarized buffer zone in the Golan Heights, crossing into Syrian territory for the first time since 1973's October War. The acknowledgement comes as strikes from Israeli warplanes continue across Syria. Last night, Syrian naval ships were sunk in air attacks following a weekend in which Israel's forces hit suspected chemical weapons plants. The United Nations has said such operations must stop. Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and Egypt have all accused Israel of exploiting the downfall of President Assad. Matthew Miller, the US State Department spokesperson, said the Biden administration would be speaking to Israel behind closed doors before taking a public stance on the matter.
I will let Israel speak to its own operations and what it is they are trying to accomplish. I will say that on behalf of the United States, we're going to discuss these matters with them privately before I opine on them publicly. I would say that broadly speaking, we of course don't want to see any action that makes a Syrian-led process more difficult, and we ultimately want to see a peaceful process forward, not an escalation of the conflict.
Well, Yossi Mekelberg is an associate fellow with the Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House. And he told me what he made of Israel's operations in Syria.
I think what we see from Israel is sending mixed messages right now. On the one hand, Prime Minister Netanyahu was talking about his wish to have diplomatic relations with the new government in Syria, but at the same time already declared that the ceasefire agreement of 1974 has collapsed, and as a result took the other side or the Syrian side of the Hermon mountain. And we saw overnight more than 100 attacks inside Syria. And I think what Israel is doing right now is preparing or operating according to the worst case scenario. They don't want the chemical weapons and chemical agents that exist in Syria to fall into the hands of the new government, fear of, in case of there is extreme Islamist and hostile government. But at the same time, if they want good diplomatic relations, I can see, for instance, the point of destroying, as the defense minister Israel Katz said today, destroying the navy or many other military installation and weaken Syria. But I think they are trying to take a course of actions that will degrade the Syrian military to an extent that it won't pose any threat for many years to come.
Yeah, we've seen the virtual destruction of Syria's navy in the main port. Around 500 drone and airstrikes over the last couple of days. And criticism coming from the United Nations, from Turkey, from the UAE, from Qatar, from Saudi. They are accusing Israel of trying to take advantage of the turmoil in Syria.
I think by any definition, this is an act of aggression, because as for now, neither the previous government regime, or definitely not that current one, hasn't posed or threat or threatened Israel with military action. This is what Israel sees as a preemptive strike. Now, the fear about the chemical weapons, I think some within the international community would understood and accepted. But this massive attack on a country and taking some of its territory, on this scale, and at the same time expressing the desire to have diplomatic relations, I'm not so sure how these two go hand in hand.
Only yesterday, Benjamin Netanyahu was trying to claim some of the credit for the downfall of the Assad regime. Do you think there is a real risk that this could end up reflecting very badly on the Israeli government?
I think so. As it is, because of the way Israel conducts the war in Gaza, to an extent also in with Hezbollah, that many civilians were killed in Lebanon too. We saw that there were arrest warrants, ICC arrest warrant against Prime Minister Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Gallant. Israel is its reputation, the word, its credibility. I mean, military, it's improved its credibility, but as a country that abides by international law, international humanitarian law, it's an all-time law. I don't think by this attack on Syria, and we don't know how many people were killed and how many of them civilians, as they are celebrating getting rid of a very brutal regime. I don't think this will bode well, not in Syria, not in the region, and probably with the rest of the international community.
Do you think there is any prospect that Israel could heed those international warnings and withdraw at least to the extent of the buffer zone around the Golan Heights to cease these strikes?
I think what Israel is trying to do is to use sort of what they see as a window of opportunity of few days. I will be very surprised if will try to sustain it over a long time. But then there will be the question of the territory that actually they seize and for how long. From the beginning, Israel claimed it's a temporary, but what is temporary? Is it a matter of days, weeks, months, or as we've seen many times, the temporary ends in years and without any resolution?
And in the midst of all this, Benjamin Netanyahu himself has appeared in court on corruption charges. Is there any realistic prospect that, as Prime Minister of the country, he could yet be convicted?
I think the court case is now more than 4.5 years old, and this is the first time that Netanyahu himself gives evidence, and this is interrupted, and he keeps claiming that it's difficult for him to run the country, and being embroiled in such a court case. That is right, but that's the reason that so many claim that he should suspend himself and let other or someone else run the country and become prime minister, at least for this period that he gives evidence. It's a very unhealthy situation for the democratic system, for the separation between the different government branches. And that's why for not even in the last few months, but for 2 years since he formed his sixth government, is attacking the judiciary and trying with one aim in mind to derail his corruption trial.
Well, that was Yossi Mekelberg, Associate Fellow with the Middle East and North Africa Programme at Chatham House, speaking to me just a little earlier here